Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. I'm Jackie Kemp. I'm a writer and journalist, and I have a Substack newsletter if you're interested. Just Google Jackie Kemp Substack to find that. I'm going to take you through some of the news of today. Um, First of all, an update on what's been happening in Ukraine, day 483. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Western leaders to help rebuild his war-torn country as he hailed the reconstruction project as a crucial part of its fight for freedom. The Ukrainian president addressed the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London via video link on Wednesday as Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reiterated their support for the country. Two drones have been intercepted on their approach to military warehouses in the Moscow region, Andrei Vorbev, the governor of the area, has said, according to Reuters. Ukrainian forces are very actively destroying the enemy, physically clearing Ukraine, President Zelensky said in his latest evening address. Russia has threatened strikes on Kiev's decision-making centres if Ukraine uses Western-supplied missiles against the occupied peninsula of Crimea. Sorry about this siren. I'll just give it a moment to go past. Russia has threatened strikes on Kiev's decision-making centres if Ukraine uses Western-supplied missiles against the occupied peninsula of Crimea, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has said. Overnight, Russia struck military and infrastructure targets in Ukraine's capital Kyiv and across other parts of the country, including western areas far from the front lines, Ukrainian officials said. Several commercial and administrative buildings and some private houses were damaged in drone attacks on the Kyiv area, while a critically important facility was struck in Lviv. There was no mention of casualties. Krylo Budanov, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, has accused Russia of mining the cooling pond used to keep the reactors cool at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine's south. That's very concerning, isn't it? Because they've already weaponized the dam, and it's that we're watching that situation with great anxiety. And now we're going to move on to UK matters. UK inflation remains at 8.7%. Borrowers have been put on notice for further Bank of England interest rate rises after inflation in the UK unexpectedly remained stuck at 8.7% in May. I'm not sure it was unexpected by, adding to the pressure on households suffering a surge in mortgage costs. Figures from the Office of National Statistics showed that annual inflation, as measured by the Consumer Prices Index, was unchanged last month from the rate in April. City economists had forecast a figure of 8.4%. In a shock report that underscored the challenge facing the central bank to curb the highest rate of inflation in decades, energy prices stabilising at record levels were offset by a sharp rise in the cost of airfares and package holidays as consumers rushed to book overseas summer travel. Rising prices for second-hand cars, live music events and video games also contributed to inflation remaining high. Core inflation, a measure that excludes food, energy, alcohol and tobacco prices and which is closely watched by the bank, rose from 6.8% in April to 7.1% in May, the highest level since 1992. Falling petrol and diesel prices for motorists led to the largest downward contribution to inflation, while pressures from food and drink prices eased after they increased by less in May than in the same month a year earlier. Prices remain high and are still rising fast, adding to pressure on struggling households. Although food and drink inflation slowed from 19% in April, it only dropped to 18.3%, still among the fastest rises in decades. The figures highlighted the UK's position as an international outlier with the highest inflation in the G7. The rate is more than 3 times the figure in the US and significantly higher than in several EU countries. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson at Westminster Stuart Hosey said, "People are paying an unacceptable price for Westminster failure as UK inflation continues to soar, showing exactly why Scotland needs to escape Westminster control with independence. With worse inflation than the EU and the US, it's clear Brexit and Westminster mismanagement are playing a devastating role in trashing the UK economy and increasing the cost of living for families. But neither the Tories or pro-Brexit Labour Party will admit the truth and ditch their damaging Brexit obsession." So the cost of food imports has obviously clearly gone up. If the cost of food exports has also gone up, and there are fewer exports, which has a knock on effect because when vans come over to bring stuff over to Britain from the EU, then they have to kind of go back empty. It's obviously much more difficult, and people can sell their things elsewhere. They can sell their fruit and vegetables elsewhere in Europe, and there's been a lot of speculation that a lot of commentators have said, "Oh, we get a lot of fruit and vegetables from Morocco," but the stuff from Morocco goes through the EU, so obviously they can avoid the delays and so on in Britain if they sell it elsewhere. So, so that is a concerning problem, and Brexit is obviously a huge part of it. And unfortunately, the British government seems unable to admit that or deal with it. And the measure that they're trying to take of reducing interest rates, of increasing interest rates, as we're about to hear, has a consequence for a section of society. 1.4 million UK mortgage holders face 20% hit to disposable income from interest rate hikes. More than 1 million households across the UK are expected to lose at least 20% of their disposable incomes thanks to the surge in mortgage costs expected before the next election, the Institute for Fiscal Studies (IFS) has warned. Sounding the alarm as mortgage costs reach the highest level since the 2008 financial crisis, the IFS said that almost 1.4 million mortgage holders would see at least a fifth of their disposable income erased. It said the heaviest blow would be reserved for those under the age of 40 with larger mortgages, with the biggest financial hit for households in London and the southeast of England, where property prices are typically higher than the national average. The biggest rise is for those in their 30s, for whom payments will jump by £360 a month or 11% of disposable income. The prospect comes as the government faces growing pressure to intervene amid what some MPs have termed a mortgage time bomb waiting to explode for millions of households as they reach the end of fixed rate deals on their home loans. More than a quarter of mortgage holders are expected to reach the end of cheaper deals before the next election, which must be held by 28th of January 2025. Households are facing a sharp rise in costs as high street banks drive up new home loan costs above 6%, the highest level since Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget last autumn. It comes as the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for a 13th consecutive time on Thursday in response to stubbornly high inflation, which has left the UK with the highest rate in the G7. Figures on Wednesday showed inflation unexpectedly remained unchanged at 8.7% in May, adding to pressure on the bank for further increases. According to the analysis by the IFS, more than 14 million adults over the age of 20 have a mortgage. Many have fixed rate mortgages and so in the short term are shielded from rate rises, but eventually those fixed terms come to an end, leaving households exposed to soaring costs. In March 2022, households with a mortgage were spending an average of £670 a month on payments. On average, individuals in mortgage holding households will pay almost £280 on top of this amount each month, with those in their 30s paying almost £360 more. Adults over the age of 60, typically with smaller mortgages, often having bought their homes when property prices were lower, um, or after years of repaying loans, would face the smallest hit at just over £150 a month. And there's obviously a knock-on effect as well for the rental market because buy-to-let mortgages will also be going up, and renters already pay a bigger proportion of their income to their landlords. So one has to question, I think, whether or not this policy of raising interest rates, if the underlying is basically Brexit, then raising interest rates isn't going to help. It's not going to make the situation any better because when they fully put on the Brexit-related import controls, food prices are going to go up even higher. So it is potentially a very dangerous situation for lots of people. And I don't think the UK government, has any answers. So the next story that we're going to talk about is children who suffered under UK austerity. A study finds children raised under UK austerity are shorter than European peers. Children in the UK who grew up during the years of austerity are shorter than their peers in Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Lithuania, a study has found. In 1985, UK boys and girls ranked 69 out of 200 countries for average height aged 5. At the time, they were on average 111.4 centimetres and 111 centimetres tall, respectively. Now in the UK, boys are 102nd and girls 96th, with the average 5-year-old boy measuring 112.5 centimetres and the average girl 111.7 centimetres. In Bulgaria, the average height for a 5-year-old boy is 121 centimetres and a girl 118 centimetres. Experts have said a poor national diet and cuts to the NHS are to blame. But they've also pointed out that height is a strong indicator of general living conditions, including illness and infection, stress, poverty, and sleep quality. They have fallen by 30 places, which is pretty startling, said Professor Tim Cole, an expert in child growth rates at the Great Ormond Street Institute of Child Health, University College London. The question is why? GPs in poorer areas of the country have reported a resurgence of Victorian diseases such as rickets and scurvy, caused largely, they say, by nutritional deficiencies. NHS data shows that about 700 children a year are admitted to hospital with malnutrition, rickets, or scurvy in England. Separate research suggests that dietary inequalities in children from poorer backgrounds are driving higher rates of problems, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, and dental decay. Cole, who was not involved in the study, said the data suggests that growing up in the 2010s, which happened to coincide with the period of austerity, tells me that austerity has clobbered the height of children in the UK. Food experts point out that a diet of cheap junk food makes people simultaneously overweight and undernourished. In the Netherlands, the average 5-year-old boy is 119.6 centimetres and the average girl is 118.4 centimetres tall. In France, the figures are 114.7 centimetres and 113.6 centimetres. In Germany, they are 114.8 and 113.3. Danish boys are on average 117.4 centimetres tall and Danish girls 118.1. Henry Dimbleby, the former government food advisor, said that in modern Britain the way we eat is one of the clearest markers of inequality. Annual surveys show children from the poorest fifth of families consume about a third less fruit and vegetables, 75% less oily fish, and a fifth less fibre than children from the most well-off families. The data is taken from national measurement programs collated by the Non-Communicable Disease Risk Factor Collaboration, a global network of health scientists. Okay, and next story is, for me, this is a bit of a shocker because although I didn't think that Keir Starmer was going to abolish the House of Lords, I'm surprised that they've pulled back from that so early on. Labour plans to appoint dozens of peers to the House of Lords. Labour has defended its plan to appoint dozens of peers to the House of Lords if it wins the next election, despite having promised once again to abolish the upper chamber altogether. Angela Smith, Labour's leader in the Lords, said Labour's priority would be to get legislation through Parliament if it won the next election, even if that meant increasing the size of an institution it had previously said it would scrap. The party has come under fire from some, including the Scottish National Party, who accused it of hypocrisy, given the Labour leader Keir Starmer has previously warned about peerages being handed to lackeys and donors. Starmer promised to abolish the Lords and replace it with a smaller, cheaper, democratically elected second chamber. Labour would not commit to doing so in a first term in government, saying only that it hoped to do so. The report comes just weeks after former Prime Minister Gordon Brown called for a replacement to the House of Lords, and a mere 113 years after Labour first promised to abolish the House of Lords. The SNP has warned that this latest U-turn underlines the hollow promises Labour makes on a daily basis. The SNP's Tommy Shepherd said, "The House of Lords fails at every level to represent or respect the views and wishes of the Scottish people. It has no place in a modern democracy and is a key contributor to this broken Westminster system. That is why the SNP is the only major party to have consistently campaigned for it to be abolished. Meanwhile, Labour have been promising to abolish the House of Lords for 113 years, but they lack the backbone for any meaningful action. It will come as no surprise to voters in Scotland that yet again, Sir Keir Starmer's party is U-turning on another pledge, this time to reform the House of Lords. They're up to their old sleek tricks again, and voters across the country can see right through their hollow promises." So once they've made another 100 new Labour peers, they're not going to want to abolish the place, are they, once they get their £350 a day and their ermine? Former leader of Aberdeen City Council quits the Labour Party. Councillor Barney Crockett, who led the Aberdeen Labour Party twice and was council leader between 2012 and 2014, has quit the party over Sir Keir Starmer's energy strategy, which he said was more brutal than anything Margaret Thatcher did to Scotland's industrial communities. Councillor Crockett told Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce he was stunned and bemused by Mr Starmer's announcements and warned Margaret Thatcher never delivered a more brutal put-down of an industry than that delivered by Keir Starmer in Edinburgh. It comes as local figures, trade unions and industry representatives hit out at the Labour leader's plans, with GMB General Secretary Gary Smith and Offshore Energy UK Chief Exec David Whitehouse both warning that plans would create a cliff edge, deterring investment, threatening jobs and heightening the risk of energy shortages. SNP MP for Aberdeen North, Kirsty Blackman said, "It's no wonder Labour Party figures are quitting the party over Keir Starmer's damaging plans to carve up Scotland's energy sector, which shows why Scotland needs energy independence, not more Westminster control. For decades, Westminster has taken billions of pounds from Scotland's energy wealth and hoarded it at the UK Treasury instead of reinvesting it back into Scotland's communities. Now Keir Starmer is doing it all over again, and he's putting jobs and investment at risk across Scotland. The SNP is the only party offering real change with independence. Only independence can give Scotland the power we need to protect energy jobs, properly invest in the renewables gold rush, and build a more prosperous future." So, MP presents bill to protect banking and postal services in rural communities. An SNP MP has presented a 10-minute rule bill in the House of Commons on banking and postal services in rural communities. Drew Hendry's bill will set out minimum service standards for the provision of banking and postal services in rural areas, including through physical outlets and for connected purposes. Rural postal and banking services have been in decline across the UK, and the MP for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey will tell the House of Commons how this damages rural communities, particularly older people. Commenting, Drew Hendry said, "The bill gets to the heart of what being a Member of Parliament is all about, making your constituents' voices heard. Concerns over the reduction of these services are hardly new and is something I've long campaigned on, but the calls are becoming more and more desperate as the number of banks and post offices in our rural communities plummets towards zero. When I knock on doors or speak to locals in our streets or parks, this is an issue which comes up time and time again. 6 weeks ago, I wrote to the UK and Scottish Government ministers to see what could be done. I have a meeting coming up with the Scottish Government Minister, but disappointingly, if unsurprisingly, I've yet to hear back from UK Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch." Mr Henry said that although many folk are able to adapt into the way the world is moving towards a digital and online age, the folk that find it harder to adapt should not be left behind. He said that physical interactions in places like banks foster a sense of community and reassurance that digital services simply cannot replicate. He finished by saying that the UK government should not be leaving those who wish to use physical outlets behind, and called on them to support his bill as it moves forward through the House. If that doesn't happen, it'll be yet another example of Westminster not working for our towns and villages across Scotland, he concluded. Actually, I've got a friend who lives on a Hebridean island and has a business selling soft furnishings like cushions and lampshades and things, and she goes to the post office every day. And I'm sure there are many people running small businesses in the Highlands who use it as well. It's a vital piece of infrastructure. US Supreme Court Judge Samuel Alito facing ethics questions over failure to declare gifts from billionaire with case before court. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is facing questions for not declaring several gifts received from conservative billionaire Paul Singer and for not recusing himself when Singer had cases presented before the court. The latest report questioning the ethics of Supreme Court justices came from ProPublica, which recently published several articles on the relationship between Justice Clarence Thomas and Republican billionaire Harlan Crow. According to the ProPublica report published on Tuesday night, Alito accepted a seat on a private plane owned by Singer and flew to Alaska for a luxury fishing trip at the King Salmon Lodge, which costs $1,000 a night. Abby Smith, a Georgetown law professor, told ProPublica Alito should have recused himself because of the gift from Singer. "If she were representing a client in such a case and found out about the gift after the fact," Smith said, "I'd be outraged on behalf of my client, and frankly, I'd be outraged on behalf of the legal system." Alito did not respond to ProPublica's questions for the piece. Instead, the justice published a Wall Street Journal op-ed about the trip several hours before the ProPublica piece published. I mean, that's corruption, right? That's the right name for it. Buildings on fire followed gas explosion in Paris. A gas explosion has occurred in the 5th arrondissement of Paris, resulting in several buildings catching fire, local officials have reported today. Police told people to avoid the Val de Grace area after the facade of a building collapsed and the fire appeared to have spread to neighbouring buildings. Just after 5 p.m. local time, people described one big explosion and a smaller one. One man told France Info Public Radio, "It was shocking, it's a disaster." Le Figaro and BFM TV reported police sources saying at least 4 people were in a critical condition. Police, fire services and ambulance service rushed to the scene. The Paris prosecutor said it was not possible at this stage to determine the cause of the fire. At about 6:45 local time, police said the fire was under control and that rescue work was continuing. Rue Saint-Jacques leads from the Notre Dame to the Sorbonne University and the Val de Grace Military Hospital and is a few blocks from the popular Jardin de Luxembourg. The area is usually packed with tourists and foreign students in the summer. Strathclyde University is to offer the UK's first offshore energy transition degree. The University of Strathclyde has become the first university in the UK to offer a Master of Science degree in offshore energy transition. With an increasing demand for energy transition solutions around the world, there's an urgent need to train a sufficient number of experts with the required skill sets to take up the relevant positions in industry. Strathclyde's MSc course, in collaboration with the Engineering Construction Industry Training Board, has been designed to respond to this need and facilitate career change for those who've previously worked in relevant industrial sectors and are keen to take part in the emerging renewable energy industry. The course has been developed in collaboration with the ECITB, an employer-led skills body for industry, and one of the leading voices around the path to net zero, contributing to the UK government's Green Jobs Delivery Task and Finish groups. It has the aim of looking at the workforce and skill requirements to support energy transition. The MSc is built upon the successful Strathclyde ECITB Energy Transition Leadership Programme, which was attended by over 100 short course delegates based in industry. This course, which is offered on a part-time basis and delivered fully online, is suitable for those who are working full-time in industry and are seeking further training for new job opportunities and an enhanced career trajectory in offshore renewable energy. Aimed at engineers and managers, the course introduces the innovative technologies, organisational strategies and business models that will underpin net zero. It's delivered through a series of online theoretical lectures, self-study and group activities. It contains 4 core modules, 4 optional modules, an individual thesis, and a dissertation to create an energy transition roadmap for companies. Each module will be delivered in 5 consecutive weeks using online delivery. The programme will enable delegates to achieve a range of different levels of academic qualification, from an MSc to credits towards a postgraduate certificate and postgraduate diploma. St Andrews University Scotland's Future Series to be showcased at Edinburgh Book Festival. A University of St Andrews project exploring sense of place and the impact it has on thinking, creativity and human relationships is to take centre stage at the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Sponsored by the University of Scotland's Future Series, Growing Roots, A Sense of Place has been developed by Dr. Roxani Cristali, lecturer in the School of International Relations at St Andrews. Originally from Greece, educated in the US and having worked in conflict-affected areas across the world, Roxani's project was inspired by her desire to understand how relations, including with land and place, shape what sustains life in the wake of violence and loss. Roxani will host Creating with a Sense of Place, a conversation between Scottish singer-songwriter Corinne Polwart and Arcadian author Amy Liptrot, featuring musical accompaniment by Dave Milligan at the festival's Baillie Gifford Sculpture Court on Friday the 18th of August. Commenting on the event, Roxani said, "I'm so excited that there's been such interest in this project and that I can work with others, musicians, authors and those involved in Scotland's vibrant creative sector to explore how important sense of place is and the impact it has on our identity, how we think, our relationships and our work." The Edinburgh International Book Festival event will weave together stories, poems and songs to explore what places have shaped our identities and how our geographical biographies emerge in the art we make. Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who's donated and to everyone who's signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We've set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night, and thank you for watching.